Welcome to It's a Yes, Making It in Media. I'm Jo Wood. And I'm Debra Sharron. Between us, we've spent many years helping people build successful media careers, from first jobs to senior leadership.
Each week, we answer real questions from our listeners, covering everything from interviews to sales conversations with clear, practical advice.
If you're ambitious, capable, and ready to take control of your career, you're in the right place.
Welcome back. This is episode 5, and today we're mastering negotiation skills, handling price objections, creating value, and closing deals without caving.
This is crucial because the moment the client asks, can you do it for less, determines whether you're seen as a partner or a seller. How you negotiate shapes your entire relationship and, of course, your income.
In this episode, you'll learn what's really happening when someone pushes back on price, how to recognize buying signals you're currently missing, the value menu approach to negotiation, and why your exit strategy is killing your close rate.
Given that we're calling the podcast It's a Yes, I guess this particular episode is really important. We'll be addressing questions from Josh and Sophie today. Josh wants to know how to handle discount requests, and Sophie's struggling with negotiation confidence. We've coached hundreds of salespeople through these exact scenarios and seen what separates average closers from top billers. Plus, we're delighted to be joined by some of our experts to help us answer their questions.
That sounds great. Let's jump in.
Jo, I'm very excited to talk today about negotiation skills because it seems to me that at every point of the recruitment process and the sales process, knowing what win-win looks like and having the skills to hold your nerve is really important. And what I've seen in training is that the world seems to be divided between people who relish negotiating whenever they possibly get the opportunity to, and other people who think it's a little bit vulgar and run a mile.
Completely. And you're always conscious that there is a balance between pushing too hard, which blows the deal completely out of the window, and making sure that you've got the best that you possibly could get.
I think it's always that thing that when you are at the point of doing some kind of a deal and the other party says yes very quickly, occasionally you think, maybe they were a bit too keen. Maybe I could have done a little bit better. And that's the sort of area that I think it's worth us talking about today, where you can maybe take a little bit more control.
It's a really hard thing, isn't it, to know exactly where to draw the line, how hard to push, how long to wait, whether to hold your ground. And also, if when it comes down to it, are you willing to walk away or lose the deal if you do push too hard? And that's quite a difficult decision to make too, isn't it?
Well, I think that's very interesting because it highlights the two stages of any negotiation. And one is the preparation stage, when you work out what your ideal outcome might look like, and similarly what your point of walking away should be. And the second is having the skills to do it in a controlled, long-term relationship building way where you have credibility, but you also know how to pace the conversation. So actually being able to help people to understand those two parts of the equation can be really important. In terms of salary negotiations, does that often come up as a point at which you as a recruiter have to help people to navigate the negotiation on what the salary could look like?
It does come up a lot, actually, although there's a fine line, because essentially when we're talking to candidates, we try and establish exactly what they're on currently and what their salary expectations really are. And when we send them to a client, we'll make that clear. And interestingly, clients often come in with a slightly lower offer, knowing that a salesperson will want to demonstrate their sales ability and negotiate slightly higher.
So one of the things that we cover in training is that in any negotiation, both parties benefit by establishing their LIM, like, intend, and must. What would I like this negotiation to end up looking like? What do I intend it to probably end up being? And what must it deliver for it to work for me? So probably on the candidate and on the client side, those are three different parameters that are consciously or unconsciously being established.
I think it's probably a bit easier for the candidate if you are working with a recruitment consultant, to be honest, because we do have both sides of the story set out in front of us. We always know when there are parameters of salary that the end point could be anything between that and that. But equally, we do know when a client has a hard no, and it's persuading the candidate that actually that is as good as it gets. Do you want to leave? Yes or no? Do you want to take the job? Yes or no? And there is a point at which you just have to say, that's it.
I wonder whether actually people find it very difficult to talk about money. Do you think that culturally we've got some taboos, maybe some anxieties about having an upfront conversation? I think on the sales side, as much as on the recruitment side, a lot of salespeople would much rather put their price proposal into an email than actually sitting in front of a client and having a face-to-face conversation about money.
Actually, I'm not sure that it's about money per se. I think it's about the anxiety around putting something out there that you know somebody might say no to. And whilst you avoid the subject of money, whether that be, I presume, in a sales negotiation or even around salary, if you don't talk about it, you think it's not going to affect the decision. Whereas you know that as soon as you do put it out there, then there is a viewpoint that will come straight at you. And I think that sometimes people avoid it for that reason.
Yeah, I think sometimes people can be very apologetic when they start talking about money. On the sales side, they might offer a discount just to be liked rather than because the other party has asked for a discount. The premature discounter is somebody that I worry about quite a lot. Now let's check out our listeners' questions for this episode. Got a question here around salaries from Josh in London. Josh says, I've got a second interview next week and I know they're going to ask about salary expectations. The range advertised is 35 to 45k and I'm currently on 38. How do I pitch for the top end without pricing myself out? What if they say no?
I love this kind of question because there are literally two things here. First of all, in all honesty, if you say you're on 38, a hiring manager will expect to give you 2-3k in terms of pay rise, but you're right, may not necessarily look to give you the 45. There is a school of thought that you should perhaps say you're on slightly more in the first instance. Whether that's right or not, probably equally valuable is demonstrating in the interview why you're worth the 45k. And that will be around showing what revenue you've brought to your current role, how you've gone about your business. Having said that, even if you show that you are outstanding, the chances are they will offer you less than the top end because equally they want something for you to grow in. And there is then an opportunity if they make an offer that, say, for instance, came in at, say, 40 or so, for you to show your negotiation skills by going back and saying, actually, you know, I really want this job, but I'd like a little bit more.
I have to say, if I was recruiting and I had advertised that the salary band was up to 45k and I was recruiting a sales professional, I would be really delighted if they went in and asked for the 45k because I would want them to be doing that every time they were reaching out to one of my clients and they were confident negotiators and they were not afraid to think big. How that plays out in terms of the actual role, I can see is more subtle than this.
In many cases, Deborah, if the budget is between that and that, yeah, the talent team, the hiring manager, they want to save some money in the pot to be able to do pay rises. Yeah. And they will offer less in the hope that they can get away with slightly less. Yeah. But they may well expect that there'll be a negotiation and they'll meet somewhere in the middle.
So it's kind of your opening bid for the conversation, but it says quite a lot about your own confidence as a negotiator.
Yeah.
Interesting. It sort of links into the next question, which is from Sophie in Leeds. A client loves our proposal, but says the budget is 30% less than our rate card. My manager says, see what you can do, but I don't want to cave immediately. How do I negotiate without losing the deal or giving away too much margin?
This one is definitely for you, Deborah.
Well, I don't want to say that buyers are liars, but actually I think that every client under the sun will say that their budget is significantly less than the deal that they've just been offered. So I would be inclined to really hold firm on pricing and lean into adding value rather than doing anything that reduces your price. The minute you open a negotiation, potentially you stretch out the whole process of the final agreement.
So I'm always intrigued with that. What does adding value mean? What would you actually offer?
That's when the creativity comes in. There are other things that the client might find valuable that would be over and above what the actual price might look like. On the sales side, I think that deal making is very creative because actually the price is only one of many variables and a good negotiator will explore a whole variety of other things that they might be able to put on the table before they drop the price. So can they extend the length of a campaign? Can they add extra inventory into a package? Can they initiate introductions to the wider team? There are many, many things that potentially could be hugely valuable to the client, even more valuable, arguably, than a reduced price. And I think it's a real mindset to recognize that negotiation doesn't necessarily mean just reducing the price of what you're offering, but exploring the wider value that could perhaps build into a package.
So if you're a salesperson and you're on a call, do you think it's advantageous to have a list of those kind of value options in front of you that you can or may have thought about in advance of your conversation? If you know the conversation is going to be around price, that you've got other features and benefits and values that you can throw in along the way.
I think it's a brilliant team exercise to sit down and brainstorm every single thing that a team have got in their remit that they could possibly offer before they discount, and then to shape questions when they're in a sales conversation to explore which of those things is going to be most relevant to the person in front of them. So I think it's a great idea. And quite often in training, we do that very exercise, and then we work out which is a high, which is a medium, and which is a low variable in terms of its value to the other party. And what you always want to be finding is what can you offer that is of low cost to you, but incredibly high value to them. And that's the sweet spot. And when you've been able to establish that, it may well be that extending that campaign so it runs for 2 months rather than 1 month is going to be much more valuable than knocking a couple of £100 off the package. So I think it's about being creative in your thinking. And to my mind, that's what value is. It's about exploring what else sits within the package.
Sophie doesn't give us too many details about what it is that she's actually pitching. But for example, maybe you can improve the position of where a particular ad might appear. Anything that you have available that you're not going to lose out by offering into the mix. Maybe it's as simple as sending an introductory email to the editorial contact that would be most interested in the advertiser and their brand. Because if you think about it yourself, if you're going on holiday, sometimes you might want to get that holiday for 20% less. But actually, if you're able to include some meals or your transfers from or to the airport, or there's a bottle of wine in the room, some of those things will add to your total experience, which will make you feel more comfortable about actually paying that price. So there are lots of times in our other buying experience where we put a very high regard on added value. But I think it's a very good activity to see what you have to offer yourself.
That's really interesting. So do you actually think that many media companies do that?
Not enough, because I think there are a lot of people under pressure, absolutely understandably, to cave when the client says that they haven't got enough budget or their budget's been cut. The easiest thing is to say, what would we need to do in order to be able to get this away? And the minute you do that, you've effectively ripped up your rate card and you've given the buyer control over pricing. And I think that buyers are absolutely right to test and to try it out. And I probably would say that 6 out of 10 times it works. But actually, sales teams that I've worked with who hold firm on their pricing and are more creative about the added value close deals much faster.
So do you think that that was your own personal sort of persistence and cleverness, if you like, that made you think about those kind of things when you were back in the day and learning? Or did you work with hiring managers, or did you have line managers at that time that were, ahead of their game and able to help you to think in that direction?
I was extremely lucky that I had some inspirational managers who were very, very good as role models. You could see them in a negotiating situation, and they would always seek to do negotiating face to face, which I think has got lost a little bit. And I think it's really powerful when you sit in front of somebody and do the negotiation, because then you can be more exploratory.
So just rewinding half a yard, yeah. Did you go with your line managers on negotiation meetings? Did you actually sit there and watch somebody do that?
Either there were more joint meetings, I think, but the other thing that we used to do for many years, and I still encourage clients today to do it, is listening into calls with your manager.
Okay, so if we go back again to our different conversations on various podcasts, about hybrid working, working from home, how do you do that in today's world where there's so much siloed activity going on?
I think technology makes that easier rather than more difficult. I think being able to record a call, play it back, listen to it with your manager is easier now than it's ever been. If you're having a Teams call, there's no reason why you couldn't do that in real time. Obviously, sometimes you have to ask permission, I think, with your client. But side-by-side coaching at the desk is something that we definitely saw a value in. And I think it's not that it can't be done now. I think that people feel less comfortable about doing it. But there's nothing better than sitting on a call, having a negotiation, having a conversation with a client, and then being able to sit down with your manager, who, as your coach, can talk you through what's worked well and how you could improve that next time.
So if you were Sophie, who's sort of early doors in her career, presumably, you would be advocating that she does as many joint meetings with her manager, at least asks lots of questions from that person, and then listens to and gets as many face-to-face meetings to actually do her deal making as she can.
I definitely think so. And I think that if Sophie can pluck up the courage to say to her client, I'd like to jump on a Teams call to go through how we could work together, she may feel she's got more control. Because as we were talking about in a previous podcast, ghosting happens a lot. I've got a little theory, which is you get one go at a pitch. You might only get in front of that client once. Right? So you may not get the follow-up call or the follow-up conversation. So in that first conversation, you've got to make sure that not only do you find out their needs and pitch your value, you also force yourself to begin the negotiation process. So you actually say to the client, when you've got their attention, okay, to be able to progress this conversation, you'd be looking at an investment of, or the fee structure is this, that you have that conversation while you've got their human attention. And then you might back it up on an email, but you get their real-time response and you create the conversation around value while you're actually in that first call.
Wow.
I know. Radical, isn't it?
Back in the day, no. But now, almost certainly, yes.
I think we used to expect that there'd be several goes at a conversation. You'd be invited back. You'd be able to discuss whatever it is you'd sent over. But we know we lose the conversation after that first go. So if you assume you're not going to get the second one, what more could you do in the first conversation to try and at least get to that trial close? In principle, does this sound like something you'd like to move ahead with?
Sophie, has this helped you?
I think so.
I hope so.
Have
we put you right off? Have we put you right off? Could be either from where I'm sitting.
Well, yeah, it's not. No one said it was easy, Sophie. But actually, if the client loves the proposal, which is the first part of your email, you're halfway there. Now let's ask our experts. This week, we're hearing advice on good negotiation practice from 3 of our experts. First up, we have Emma Cranston.
Emma is Senior Director of Advertising at the Ozone Project. Welcome to the show, Emma.
So, Emma, we've had a question that I think every salesperson would like the answer to, actually, which is, what do agencies respect in a negotiation and what destroys a media owner's credibility? Have you got any thoughts about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, integrity goes a long way. I mean, you've just got to be honest. And I think people could, agencies sniff out someone who's not being honest. It's like, what's going on there? And you've just got to be upfront. And that really does build a great relationship. If you put out a brief and someone responds and it's not quite right and they're kind of trying to shoehorn it in, it's like, that's not going to benefit anyone just to get the revenue in. So, just be open, honest. This is not right for us for this one. So I think they really do respect that. Understanding the client's business as well, understanding what the client wants to achieve and making sure that you're responding to a brief that's really bespoke and addresses the client's needs, not just kind of like off the shelf, oh, I did this last week, just change the name, copy, paste, put it in. No, you've got to spend the time, and the people who put the work in is the ones who get it out. And I think the collaboration you both want from in terms of negotiation, if someone feels like they've been shortchanged or they've been done over, it's like, this leaves a bad kind of taste in the mouth. And then when it comes back to a rebooking, it's like, do you know what? No, there's walking away from it. So a collaborative, everyone walks away happy is the best way. And don't always think like you've got to race to the bottom by just doing the cheapest rates. There's lots of other, things that you can provide which will add value to the campaign, such as brand studies, creative, bespoke measurement.
Yeah, I'm really interested to hear you say that, because I think that from the sales side, there's often a perception that you're going to be able to land the deal because you were able to respond to that pressure on price. But what you're suggesting is that that may actually make the buyer a little bit less confident about the quality of what they're actually investing in.
100%. And then a question like, where does this industry end if we're all chasing down to the bottom? There's lots of value that we can kind of add along the way. Just being transparent about how you're delivering that campaign, how you're getting to those kind of rates. It's just where's my ad going to appear? And I think that's really important.
Thanks, Emma. I really hope our listeners found that useful. Now we're going to hear from Steve.
Steve Filler is the country manager at Show Heroes. Steve, welcome to the podcast.
We've had a question that asks, how do you avoid a race to the bottom on maybe CPMs when you're selling a challenger solution? So how do you build the confidence to actually hold your nerve and avoid that wild discounting?
I would always like to be the most expensive person on plan. Yeah, but I also want to be the most valuable. I also want to be the highest performing. And I think there's so many ways to deliver value that aren't just around price. And I'm not even thinking about added value, but I would rather my team spend more time thinking about different ways they can add value through different creative solutions, different levels of measurement, to be able to prove that actually what you've bought was worth it and more. Sometimes I think it's really easy for buyers just to want something at a lower price point without really thinking about the real value. And I think actually in our world, one of those challenges comes against like some of the big social platforms who are, people buy them because it's cheap reach. But then sometimes when you measure that, actually, even if you're measuring it through consistent brand uplift methodology, there's no impact. It's not moving the dial. So it's like, well, what's the point of cheap reach if it has no impact? And I know there is an element of needing to just be in the buyer's mind. And of course, I'm not saying there isn't a place for that, but that's why there is also a place for different price points from a cost perspective or value perspective.
Yeah, I think that idea of holding your nerve and not thinking you're going to win business just because you're most competitive on price, it's trying to challenge the way that the buyer is thinking.
Yeah, and it's tough because let's in every market now, most industries, there's a lot of choice, there's a lot of competition, and so the temptation is always to give people what they want. And I'm happy to have those conversations. Also, if I really understand why the buyer wants and needs a lower price, and does it actually make sense, and they have really truly considered the outcome that I will deliver versus the price that I'm offering.
That's really interesting, Steve. Thank you. Now let's bring in Rimi Atwal. Rimi is Managing Director at NetMums. Welcome, Rimi. We wanted to ask you a question from a listener who has contacted the podcast just to get your advice for them. The listener has told us in their email, I panic and cave too quickly when clients push back on price. How do I hold my nerve in a tough negotiation? Just wondering if you've got some advice that you could share.
Well, I started in sales way back when I was selling classifieds for What Hi-Fi magazine at Haymarket. So, yeah, I know how hard negotiation in sales can be. And sometimes it doesn't matter how many times you've been in that situation, whatever. It might be a new client. It might be a tough negotiation. I think, for one, everybody panics, everyone panics. It's how you deal with that panic. What my advice would be is to say that negotiation is not a fight. It's about priorities more than fight. And I think the first thing you shouldn't do is just rush with a discount. I would absolutely say just take some time to breathe, take some time to think about stuff like, is it a budget issue? Is it a values issue? Is it a timing issue? Is it a trust issue? And then I think in terms of negotiation from a sales point of view, you can frame it like, okay, we can work with that number, but what is it that matters most to you? So you can kind of go, yeah, the number can move, but also the KPIs will move in accordance to that.
And then you feel as if you've got some leverage in the conversation, that you're having a conversation rather than being told, no, you just need to discount. And I think if you feel more in control of that conversation, then you'll get a better outcome for you and the client and the brand that you're working on, and ultimately your bottom line. But also, I think you'll come away feeling more confident, which means the next time someone says that to you, hopefully you'll feel a little bit less panic and more in control. And you'll have a bit more strategies in your back pocket that you can think, okay, let me remember, how did I deal with this in that scenario? Therefore, how can I deal with it in this scenario?
So your advice seems to be to take a beat, just to be able to not be under too much pressure. Do you think it's always about price, though? When you get resistance from a buyer, whether it's agency or client, do you think they're always trying to get the price down, or do you think they might be asking for something else, but that's the language that seems to be being used?
I think it's less about price. I think that it's more about value. And that value can come into, audience insight that you could put on the table. It could come into bringing your editorial, if you're content driven, brand that is incredible in terms of premium position and the quality of your editorial, or you're an influencer brand. It's about thinking about those levers. It's never just price.
That was so interesting. Thank you, Remy. Our Yes List pick this week is really specific. It's Dragon's Den, Series 22, Episode 12. Entrepreneur Francisco handles objections from 5 incredibly tough investors simultaneously. He stays calm under pressure, pivots his pitch based on their questions, and demonstrates absolute confidence in his numbers without being arrogant. What I love most is how he handles rejection from some dragons and still keeps his energy up to win over others. That's exactly what we do in media sales. Plus, it's only about 15 minutes of viewing, perfect for a quick lunch break masterclass in persuasion under pressure. Top takeout: when facing multiple stakeholders, one person's no doesn't mean everyone says no. Keep your energy, stay confident, and pivot your pitch to address different concerns in real time. It's on BBC iPlayer. The link's in the show notes.
Thanks for listening to It's a Yes, Making It in Media.
Do follow the show and share it with someone who's serious about getting results in their media career. If you found today's episode useful, we're running a live and interactive Zoom training workshop very soon. Just click on the link in the show notes for all the details. We'd love to see you there.